this situation just took a major turn as reports have continued to escalate surrounding Pete Alonso and the Toronto Blue Jays. We have some brand new reports revealing some new details surrounding the Jays' pursuit of Alonso, but we also have the owner of the Mets, Steve Cohen, coming out and dropping some bombshell comments surrounding the Mets' pursuit, who are the Jays' #1 rival in this pursuit for Pete Alonso. And what he had to say has some serious implications in the Toronto Blue Jays. We're going to break that down and discuss what this means going forward again, and also go over some major Jays free agency updates. So before we get into it, though, quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot to go over today. Your guys' support has been unbelievable. And again, bear with the camera while I am in Toronto. I will be back with the normal setup on Monday. But a ton of news dropped. I had a video earlier today on the situation surrounding Pete Alonso and the Toronto Blue Jays. And then Steve Cohen had a press conference, and he dropped a ton of bombshell, quotes that no owner usually says, but they directly pertain to the Toronto Blue Jays and directly pertain to how the Jays' pursuit of Pete Alonso is going to go. And there's also a couple updates from numerous reporters here. So the situation has taken a bit of a turn. A few different things. We're going to start with the quotes from Steve Cohen. Then we have a report from a New York writer, I believe it is, and that is also going to shed some light on the Jays' actual negotiations. So they asked Steve Cohen about the Pete Alonso negotiations and how they're going. First of all, he said, Soto was tough. This is worse. Steve Cohen on Pete Alonso negotiations. Strong and straightforward words from the Mets owner. And this is just the beginning, but you rarely hear an owner in the middle of negotiations come out and, speak his mind. And when it comes to Pete Alonso, what these quotes are going to show us is that the Jays have a very good opportunity here, a golden opportunity to step in and make some moves here. So Mets owner Steve Cohen was brutally honest in his assessment of the team's negotiations with Alonso. The reality is it becomes harder to fit Pete into what is a very expensive group of players that we already have. Personally, this has been an exhausting conversation and negotiation. I mean, Soto was tough. This is worse. Now, this is a huge quote here. The reality is it becomes harder to fit into what is a very expensive group of players that we already have. So again, it's very rare that you have the owner come out and say things like this, but he's basically almost waving the white flag surrounding Pete Alonso and the New York Mets. He's basically telling the fans that there's a very good chance, and don't be surprised if the Mets do not get Pete Alonso. Now, over the past few days, we've been seeing a bunch of reports, a bunch of rumors and speculation surrounding how the Jays are probably being used as leverage in order to get a better offer from the Mets. But after this comes out, it seems like the Mets actually don't have a strong offer, or at least aren't able to come to a mutual agreement with Pete Alonso surrounding a contract. And I think that's for a few different reasons. Obviously, for one, the Mets have a ton of players, and they're not stricken by money. They signed Soto $1 billion almost. But when it comes to these conversations, it seems like they are just not going to come to an agreement, and it seems like more likely than ever that they are going to split up. Now, we heard that from Andy Martino over the past few days, that the Mets and Pete Alonso, Andy Martino's a reliable Mets writer, that they are not going to be, having a reuniting because of lack of negotiations. And in this gap, you're starting to see how these conversations go. So obviously, again, I don't like the negotiate. He also said this: I don't like the negotiations. I don't like what's being presented to us. Steve Cohen talks about the Mets negotiations with Pete Alonso and the possibility of the Mets moving forward without him. And you can see some Jays fans basically quote tweeting saying, you almost never hear this kind of assessment. And this is extremely interesting because for a few reasons. Again, he said that he doesn't like the negotiations. I don't like what's being presented to us. He also said it's been an exhausting conversation. And the reality is it becomes harder to fit Pete Alonso into their team. The Soto conversations, which are way, way, way more expensive than any conversation and any deal that these guys would do with Pete Alonso and the Mets, of course. And this directly correlates to the Jays because it seems like, to a degree, the Mets are bowing out of the Pete Alonso sweepstakes. Now, could this be even more negotiation tactics from the Mets side trying to get Scott Boras to say, hey, we're not going to accept your ludicrous offer or your ludicrous asking price, whatever that may be? It is very possible, and it is extremely possible that is the case. However, as you start going forward here, you also have to start, thinking about and taking into account what else is, on the go with the Mets. They have a ton of things going. But for the Jays, you have to go out and take advantage of this. If the Mets are going to be, which is your number one competitor, going to be the team, and their negotiations aren't coming through, that's why we've been hearing the Jays linked so much, because they put an offer, in front of Pete Alonso, and it seems like this might be the turning point for the Jays getting Alonso. Steve Cohen regarding the Alonso negotiations: I don't like the negotiations. I don't like the structure of the offer that's being presented to us. Maybe that changes. If it stays this way, I think we have to get used to the fact that we may have to go forward with the existing players. So, clearly, unless Pete Alonso moves, then changes his asking price, then he won't be a New York Met. It doesn't sound like, and Steve Cohen made it very clear made it clear that, the Mets aren't going to change what they're asking. It's just not going to happen. So now it's on Pete Alonso to maybe go down. But if you're the Toronto Blue Jays, you have an opportunity now to strike. You have an opportunity to go in and be like, okay, I'm going to go for this player. I'm going to give him the offer that he wants, because clearly the Mets don't like the offer that's being constructed. And we know we've been hearing from reporters the whole time that the Jays are interested in getting a guy like Pete Alonso if the right offer is there. We heard that from Ben Nicholson-Smith. We heard it from Schneider, all these different guys. So now it's up to Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro, Ed Rogers, the ownership, to get approval for that, offer, whatever it may be. We've heard, 3 years, $75 million. We've heard 3 years, $80 million, all these different things. Just pull the trigger. The Jays have yet to do a big move like this besides Santander, but they need a subsequent move. Now, as for new reports about where the current negotiations stand with the Jays, as for the Mets, the door appears to be closed with Alonso, their homegrown franchise star right now. That doesn't mean things can change on that front, but since last week, nothing has changed. Alonso is still unlikely to return to the Queens. Last week, the Mets made a counter offer of 3 years to Alonso, and Scott Boras rejected it. The Mets withdrew that specific offer after it was turned down, sources familiar with the matter said. However, it's unknown if the Mets and Alonso have since re-engaged, so whether that door is still open remains a different, or still remains a question. And you pair this with the fact that, Steve Cohen's saying this. So clearly Pete Alonso and Scott Boras didn't like the initial Mets offer. At least probably wasn't the initial offer. Whatever the negotiated offer was over 3 years, that at this point is not on the table anymore. And when you're thinking about this from a Jays perspective, you're in a pretty good spot here. The Mets are seemingly bowing out. You have a couple of other guys. The only other team that has been presented to Pete Alonso at this point is the Angels. Sources, Pete Alonso met with the Angels on Thursday. Mets are considering a trade for Spencer Torkelson, which again would be a very interesting thing. We have reports, we had the rumors and all these things coming out surrounding the Toronto Blue Jays and Pete Alonso and how a deal was almost done. So it seems at this point with these reports, the Mets are bowing out. They don't want to deal with whatever offer Scott Boras is requesting. The Jays are the front runners at this point. All signs are pointing to that, because if the Mets are out, I can't imagine he's going to go with the Angels. What I think happened now is the reports we saw a couple of days ago were, the Mets or Scott Boras using the Jays as leverage to get a higher offer from the Mets. Steve Cohen comes out and says, we're not doing that. We're not going to be, use leverage. So now this comes out to get a higher offer from the Blue Jays, because they now want another offer from the Jays. Pete Alonso met with the Angels on Thursday. I can't imagine he wants to go to the Angels, and I assume the Jays would have a bigger offer anyway. But maybe not. The Angels have been spending. They obviously got Yusei Kikuchi and things like that. But now, if this is a leverage play from Scott Boras again now saying they met with the Angels to get the Jays to pay up, that's going to be the big question as to where he actually goes. If the Mets don't want him, the Jays offer the most money. It still seems like at this point, the Jays are favorites for Pete Alonso. It just seems like that is the way that things are trending. It seems like that is the way that things are going. And if they can go out and actually pull the trigger on this move, things will be looking very good for the Toronto Blue Jays. And I think ultimately that's what it's going to come down to, is who is going to blink first. I think ultimately it will be the Jays. But let me know down below what your thoughts are. A ton of new reports are coming out. I'm going to keep you up to date on all the latest news. I pride myself on that. So make sure to smash that subscribe button. Thank you guys again for watching. Cheers.